Welcome to the Beauty Of series, where I talk about a movie I've seen recently, and what works well about it, and what makes it worth watching, completely spoiler-free. In this episode, I'll be talking about Takashi Miike's 2001 comedy drama, The Happiness of the Katakuris. The movie follows a family as they try to keep their guest house in Japan's countryside running, although they don't get many guests at all. However, many unfortunate incidents occur, and we watch as the Katakuri family do their best to overcome them as they just want a successful business and, as the title suggests, happiness. The movie opens up with a stop-motion animation of a woman eating soup, but discovers some weird creature inside of it. Right out of the gate, it tells you that this movie is unconventional and very strange, as there appears to be no deeper meaning to what just happened. Stop-motion animation appears several times throughout the 113 minutes of runtime, seemingly at random and for no reason, but somehow it works within the context of the film. As there are so many tonal shifts, it makes it impossible to predict what will be coming next. The Happiness of the Katakuris loves to remind the viewer that they're watching a film, whether it's the cheap stop-motion, seeing a wire when someone is flying, or cheesy editing techniques. It all adds together to create a very memorable and entertaining movie experience. However, because of the strange way that the movie is presented, it means that not everyone will find as much enjoyment in it as I did. But if you enjoy movies that think outside the box and purposefully confuse you, then I'm sure you'd enjoy it too. In one of the first scenes in the movie, the characters are introduced in the most straightforward way, by literally having a narrator talk about each of the characters one by one, mentioning what their personality is like and some of their past. This approach doesn't waste time with making sure the audience knows each character's views and values. However, it's rarely used nowadays due to the plain-spoken and not very subtle nature of it, and it can easily take the audience out of the film. So if a director is trying to make their movie as immersive as possible, doing this would achieve the opposite effect of what they're trying to do with their film. It would be impossible to talk about The Happiness of the Katakuris without mentioning the several musical numbers that really elevate the movie, from just enjoyable to an absolute gem of cinema. Seeing people dance around in an obnoxiously lit hotel room and moving in the most exaggerated way when there's a horrifying scene in front of them is something that everyone should experience at least once. Whenever there's a musical number in a movie, like La La Land for example, the choreography is carefully put together, and hours upon hours is put into making sure the actors execute it in sync and get it perfectly. However, with The Happiness of the Katakuris, the dancing is extremely basic, and they're rarely in sync for too long. And although this seems like a bad thing, it makes the film feel somewhat natural. Because if suddenly people burst into song in real life, they wouldn't all be great dancers and be in sync without any sort of practice beforehand. There would be a lot of looking around to see what other people are doing and catching up with their movements. The Happiness of the Katakuris is described as the sound of music meets Dawn of the Dead on Letterboxd. The movie takes this idea and runs with it as far as it can. As I said previously about the musical aspects of the movie, it also uses this to make fun of the idea that groups of people bursting into song at the exact same time. Where in The Sound of Music it's used with somewhat seriousness, here it is used as a complete joke with ridiculous shots of the characters, overly cheesy and overdone cliches, and singing which is below average, to say the least. If I had to describe this movie in one word, it would be chaotic. There are so many different scenes which are structured claustrophobically, but with a lot going on in such a tight space. And on top of that, there are several shots which can be compared to Renaissance paintings, as there's so much going on, as we're watching each of the characters react to horrifying events in their own little way. The film is shot slightly overexposed. This makes bright colors appear more glowy and dreamlike. This look is used extremely rarely as people just assume that it was a mistake, because shots rarely look impressive when they're overexposed, and it looks pretty amateur and homemade. However, to me the overexposure feels quite nostalgic because of dramas for kids that used to be aired when I was a child. Although I'm aware that this comparison is niche, and I'm probably the only person who even thought about this similarity. However, that's not the only thing that reminded me of the shows I used to watch. The camera movement style, the costume design, the set design, and even the acting feels like it came from CBBC. I never thought I'd be praising this, but at times the acting isn't too great. However, you can tell that it's intentional, as there are moments where the actors do show how talented they really are. The goofy acting adds to the overall look of the film. I just said about how it reminded me of shows I used to watch as a child, and the acting is definitely part of that as well. It goes without saying that most of the acting in those shows wasn't the best, as a lot of the actors used were child and teen actors, so they don't have as much experience under their belt. In my opinion, that added to the charm of it, and it goes the same for the happiness of the Katakuris. Although the plot of the movie is absolutely wild, considering some of the stuff that happens, the happiness of the Katakuris is ultimately about a family and the relationships between the characters, and that they'll stick together through thick and thin. One of the characters is portrayed as the cold, heartless member of the family. However, towards the end is shown this is not the case, and he loves his family just as much as everyone else. I've seen a lot of comparisons to the movies of Monty Python, more specifically The Holy Grail, and honestly this comparison makes perfect sense. The sense of humor is pretty much identical, but the context is completely different. Monty Python loves to use black humor to their advantage, as they know when the line is crossed, and they love to make up completely nonsensical situations and find humor in that. And the same can be said with the happiness of the Katakuris. There are plenty of jokes throughout the movie that if they weren't approached carefully and in a certain way, they would have fallen flat. However, they don't. If there's one thing I would change about this movie, it would be that there are more obstacles the family have to overcome, as well as some more character moments, as most of those scenes include most of the characters rather than just 2 or 3, which I'm aware sounds strange, but let me explain. Plenty of horrible things happen to the Katakuri family throughout the movie. However, I wish that it kept building up to the point where they're expecting something bad to happen, and they're very used to it until it all goes wrong. And as for character moments, there are very few scattered throughout, whether it be conversation or musical duet, but I wanted to see more of that, as there's plenty of potential for some very comedic scenes. The Happiness of the Katakuris is a very entertaining movie, one that I highly recommend to anyone with an interest in foreign film or movies that like to try something new. On my Letterboxd account, linked in the description, I gave The Happiness of the Katakuris 4.5 stars because almost every aspect of the film really stood out to me and impressed me in the strangest ways. However, it is not a perfect movie. I hope you enjoyed the first episode of my new series. These videos will come between my bigger projects as they're quicker to write and easier to edit compared to my video essays. And as always, thank you for watching.